With our supercharged political atmosphere today, feelings are running high, but you might be shocked to find out what you discover about yourself and your beliefs. This amazing research is going to help you make sense of the crazy world we're living in and avoid succumbing to ideologies and being taken advantage of by political figures who don't have your best interests at heart. If you're one of the millions of Americans who feel certain about your position on many of the hot-button issues that are plaguing our world today, this video may help you understand the pitfalls that you have a tendency to fall into when you're attracted to a particular leader or position. As you'll see, the decisions that you think you're making about these issues aren't really decisions at all. They're being driven by relationship blueprints that you learned early in life in your family of origin. Hi, it's Gabrielle, and for over 12 years I've been a licensed professional counselor in private practice in Boulder, Colorado, and my practice is grounded in the science of what makes relationships work. You're going to discover some little known but amazing research today about how your relationship blueprint also impacts your relationship with political leaders and movements. Now, if you're enjoying what you learn in these videos, please subscribe to my YouTube channel right now. Just click on the subscribe button right here. If you enjoy this video, please give it a like and share it. And please go to thepowercoupleformula.com for lots more information about how to build an amazing relationship, and powercoupleseducation.com to stay connected. Okay, let's dive in. Attachment theory is the science of how we bond with the special people in our lives. This enormous body of knowledge now has 70 years of research behind it. Attachment theory shows that you, like all mammals, are wired to connect with at least one other important person in order to ensure survival. That person is called an attachment figure. In infancy, that person is your parent or primary caregiver, and in adulthood, that person is your spouse, significant other, or perhaps very close friend. All human beings need warm, supportive, secure relationships with an attachment figure throughout the course of their entire lives in order to thrive. I've covered attachment theory extensively in my other YouTube videos, so for a deeper dive into this subject, I would refer you to my Attachment Basics playlist. So let's explore attachment for a moment so you can see how it's really at work below all of your political beliefs and all of the turmoil that we're experiencing in the political sphere right now. The basic idea behind attachment theory is that children will organize their behavior into predictable patterns in order to maximize the availability and responsivity of their parents when they're little. These patterns of behavior in relation to the caregiver or romantic partner later in life are called attachment styles. One of the amazing discoveries is that most people fall into one of three attachment styles. So here's a primer on these three attachment styles. The first is secure attachment. When a child learns that they can signal distress to a parent, like crying, reaching out, or going to a parent, and that parent will respond with sensitivity to the child in a timely manner, this leads to the development of secure attachment in that child. That child knows that they can turn to a parent when they feel demoralized, lonely, or in pain. They learn to trust others and work collaboratively, and they become affectionate, understanding caregivers and partners themselves when they get older. However, not everything goes so smoothly for all children, and many developed what's called insecure attachment. A full 50% of the general population worldwide is insecurely attached. There are two main kinds of insecure attachment. The first, which is called avoidant attachment, develops when a child's need for distress relief, affection, and support are denied by the parent. The parent either ignores the child's needs or responds to them with hostility, ridicule, or blame. The child learns that expressing emotional needs is a bad thing. They learn to shut down those emotional needs, and as adults, they become very dismissive of the emotional needs of others. With the second kind of insecure attachment, called anxious attachment, the child experiences inconsistent caregiving. Sometimes the parent responds to the child's emotional needs with sensitivity and warmth, and sometimes they're preoccupied with themselves, or they expect the child to look after their feelings, and instead of it being the other way around. Because remember, parents are supposed to take care of the children's needs. This lack of consistent caregiving causes the child to feel anxious because they can't rely on someone to have their back. As adults, this can cause the anxiously attached person to work hard to gain the approval of the important people in their lives, even at their own expense. It can also cause them to think in the most catastrophic terms that the worst possible thing is going to happen, and this can interfere with their cognitive ability and their ability to make sound choices in their own lives. Talking about attachment styles like this isn't an opportunity to categorize people as good or bad or parents as right or wrong. All parents love their children and are doing the best they can with what they have. But this is about the child's implicit sense of safety, security, and trust. In addition to the parent's parenting style, there are a lot of other life circumstances that go into the formation of an attachment style in children, such as illness, unresolved grief in a parent, economic uncertainties, and circumstances beyond a parent's control, like a war or natural disaster. But regardless, based on these early childhood experiences, the child develops a set script of what they think others will expect from them throughout life and how they see their own self-worth. So we've got two factors here: what they think others will expect from them and how they see their own self-worth. We call this script a relationship blueprint because it informs the way an individual will behave in their close relationships when they become an adult. What does your relationship blueprint have to do with how you relate to political leaders and ideologies? Well, remarkably, it turns out that parent-child relationships and spousal relationships aren't the only places where people play out their relationship blueprints. Studies show unequivocally that people also exercise their relationship blueprints in any kind of leader-follower relationship. This blueprint governs how they relate to political leaders and politics in general. Society is basically a relationship between leaders and followers, if you think about it. The government is elected by the people to lead. So the government is a collection of leaders and the people are the followers. So here's the key point that you need to be so aware of in this highly charged political environment that we live in. It's now recognized that group dynamics and relationships between leaders and followers can be seen as a kind of emotional attachment, very much like the ones that children form with their parents and that adults form with their lovers and friends. Let me say this again because it's so important. Relationships between leaders and followers can be seen as a kind of emotional attachment, very much like the one that children form with their parents and that adults form with their lovers and friends. This has huge and basically completely unrecognized implications. It explains a lot about the craziness that we see going on in our world right now. It also means that every time you turn on the TV or click on your news feed, you're activating your relationship blueprint. Everything you hear, feel, and see is running through the filter of your blueprint. It's only natural that we turn to political leaders and ideologies as sources of support, safety, and comfort when we need reassurance. But remember that many of us are insecurely attached, and our blueprint for relationships to political leaders and ideologies is more dominant than our reasoning mind. Remember I said your blueprint is made up of two core components: what you think others expect from you and your own self-esteem. As an example, think about a person in an abusive relationship. You might wonder, how did they end up there? Why do they allow themselves to be treated that way? Why don't they even seem to see that there's a problem with the way they're being treated? But when you look a little deeper, you see that it's their relationship blueprint calling the shots. They likely have a history of giving themselves away as children being charged with taking care of the needs of the adults around them, and never learning to stand up for themselves because they were afraid it would threaten the sense of connection with a parent, however precarious that might have been. Remember, your relationship blueprint isn't a conscious thought process. It's an implicit way of being that lives in your unconscious, in every cell of your body, your thinking, your emotions, and even your physiology. Think about when your favorite song comes on the radio. It triggers a whole bunch of memories, body feelings, and sensations. The song just pulls you in. You don't make a conscious decision to be excited about it. It just resonates with something deep within you. You can't really say what. And 2 minutes later, you're speeding down the road, singing your brains out, totally transported and feeling fine. The same is true with your relationship blueprint and how it gets mapped on to your relationships, whether that's with a parent, a lover, or a politician. But the truth is that modern politics and the news media understand this human vulnerability that we all have all too well. Almost everything you see and hear is designed to play into your relationship blueprint and leave you disempowered and manipulated. Now, this may sound hard to believe, but let's look at the research behind it. What does the research tell us about how your attachment style can predispose you to be manipulated by your leaders? Remember what I said earlier about the first part of your relationship blueprint has to do with what you think other people expect from you. Studies show that people with an anxious relationship blueprint have a high prioritization of what we call security love goals. Security love goals relate to the need for a person to be accepted by group members, to feel secure in their relationship with them. Anxiously attached individuals have a relationship blueprint of self in which they feel unworthy, vulnerable, and helpless. The most important goals for anxiously attached people are that they achieve closeness, consensus with the group, and support from the group. This means that when a leader is saying, this is what you need to do to conform to the group, the anxiously attached person is likely to go along with that and work hard to gain the acceptance, approval, and security of the group and the political leader. This means that, among other things, the anxiously attached will have a tendency to repeat what they hear from their leaders to others and to accept this information unquestionably for themselves. Remember, we said that the second part of the relationship blueprint is your own self-esteem. Studies show that this low self-esteem often leads them to have a very high level of group anxiety. Fundamentally, anxiously attached people worry that they're unworthy of acceptance, approval, and security. As a consequence to this low self-esteem, they don't really think about the costs and benefits for themselves or for the others whom they encourage to conform to following these political dictates. This lack of analysis of the cost to oneself of following a leader's political ideology is especially damaging and frightening when the guidance of the leaders has harmful effects for the anxious followers. The anxiously attached are likely to deny the cost to themselves of towing the party line in order to maintain the sense of connection, approval, and security they need from the group, just like they needed to do in their families of origin. This leads the anxiously attached to obey and submit to the requirements of the leader and the ideology. Remember that all of this happens largely below the threshold of conscious awareness. It's just like turning on that song on the radio. Amazingly, there's a similar kind of a vulnerability in relation to political leaders and ideologies for the avoidantly attached. How do their attachment insecurities affect their relationship to political leaders and ideologies? Now, you might assume that avoidance would simply play out their avoidant relationship blueprint in relation to leaders and ideologies, so that they would distance themselves from the ideas of society. They would downplay their interdependence on other people and their needs for other people. But actually, a number of studies show that it's exactly the opposite. And this has been a big shocker to the researchers who've looked into this, is that avoidance can actually start to look much more like anxiously attached people in group dynamics. In other words, their relationships to political leaders and ideologies can look a lot more like their anxious counterparts. What the researchers tell us is that the avoidant blueprint actually leads to group-specific anxiety, not avoidance and distancing. So that's a fancy way of saying that instead of distancing themselves from the group, they tend to act more like the approval-seeking, anxiously attached people. And researchers hypothesize groups are so threatening for avoidance because they can't get away from them. When they can't get away from participating in the group, that they're actually not able to exercise their natural distancing defenses, and they start to get extremely anxious. I'm not trying to take a political side here. I'm trying to show you the real science behind this. For instance, one of the foremost researchers of adult attachment in the 20th century, Mario Mikulincer, conducted a series of studies on 18-year-old recruits in the Israeli Defense Forces. And he gave a bunch of recruits an attachment test to determine their attachment style, and then put them all in groups where they had to achieve a particular group aim, in this case, mounting a rubber boat. And what he found was that the avoidantly attached recruits performed very similarly in terms of their group performance, and their social emotional issues were very, very much like their anxious counterparts. So they had a lot of anxiety in the group. It affected their performance, their ability to actually achieve the group aim of mounting the boat. And they also had a tremendous amount of negative, anxious thoughts about the other people in the group. So very much like their anxiously attached counterparts. The conclusion that we can draw here is that in group dynamics, most insecurely attached people are going to automatically side with the leader and do what is necessary to conform to the group. Another way in which insecure attachment is really influencing the political climate is that people are failing to look at the political issues with any degree of nuance whatsoever. Many of the issues we're facing as a country are not straightforward. They require a lot of research to get to the bottom of what is actually going on. The powers that be have many hidden agendas, but too many people are ready to adopt a simplistic, superficial understanding of the issues at hand. There's a tendency to go for a less complex mental understanding. In other words, an understanding that is so oversimplified as to completely obscure the truth. Almost any news show you turn on is going to present themselves as the all-righteous, all-knowing people, and the other group are just poo-poo heads. This oversimplification, unwillingness to look closely at underlying dynamics, and inability to tolerate contradictory facts is a hallmark of attachment, anxiety, and avoidance in groups. Dr. Gad Saad has termed this ostrich syndrome, our tendency to bury our heads in the sand and ignore alarming information that contradicts what we already think we know. Remember, insecurely attached children are rewarded for their quiet acceptance of the family culture, and they're actively discouraged from any thoughts or actions that go against the implicit expectations of the family. In insecure families, those expectations are always unfair to the child, putting the child in an untenable position. And the child's response is always to deny the cost to themselves in order to maintain the connection they need in order to survive. When you apply the knowledge that I've shared with you in this video today to what's going on in our world, it's obvious how vulnerable many of us are to being manipulated by leaders and ideologies. Our need to conform can convince us that we need to do something that might not be in our best interest. We tend to assume unconsciously that our leaders have our best interests at heart. But please understand, this could be a holdover from childhood when you could not consider the possibility that you were being treated unjustly. Many of us were in the position that we could not even consider that our parents were harming us, or at the very least, putting their own selfish needs ahead of our own. Now, my argument may seem pretty controversial to you. You may have a lot of internal barriers to even being able to consider it. It might often be easier to see the gullibility and submission in others. If you think it's happening to others, though, it might be time to look in the mirror and see if it's also happening to you. Please leave me your comments below. I look forward to reading them and seeing you in the next video.